So in this video we're going to be talking about how the Romans not only deposed their king, but threw out the very idea of monarchy itself. So the first thing to remember is that the stories that we have about the end of the monarchy, Tarquin being deposed and the Rape of Lucretia and the beginning of the Republic, all of this comes from hundreds of years later. The stories that the Romans are writing down at the end of the Republic have been shaped into legend by patriotism and sentiment and melodrama and the distorting influence of family histories and just a great deal of time. And so the versions that we have of these stories, we can't take them at face value. But they're still valuable to us because for the Romans, this is not just the story of how the monarchy ended. This is the fable of how the very idea of monarchy, one man ruling, turned Rome into a place of injustice. This is the story of how the Romans justified what no one else in their world had done. Theirs was a world of city-states. Intrinsic to the idea of the city-state is a king, a priest-king who resolves differences between citizens and defends the community from the wrath of the gods. This is how civilization is. And the Romans cast out their kings in favor of something unprecedented and unique, the Roman Republic. As I mentioned in the previous video, the seventh king of Rome was Lucius Tarquinius Superbus, Tarquin the Proud. He was, depending on how you look at the timelines, either the son or grandson of the fifth king, Tarquinius Priscus. And the gossip is, and it's kind of funny that we're talking about gossip within the context of legend, so to sort of add an extra layer of dubiousness, but the gossip is that Tarquin arranged for the unnatural death of his predecessor, Servius Tullius, and for himself to be elected in his place. The truth of that and the truth of all of this is, in a way, for us studying the Roman culture and psyche, less important than how and why these stories are told. Why it is that the Romans looked at Tarquin in this way. And clearly, he's a bad apple from the beginning. He's demonstrating what is possible if you place a city in the hands of monarchy. You have usurpers. You have the abuse of power. You have the manipulation of allies. And so Tarquin is said to have arranged for the forced submission of the Latin League to Rome. He is said to have grown increasingly paranoid, as is often the case with people who are accumulating more and more power onto themselves. The Roman monarchy was not an absolute monarchy. The Roman king was not all-powerful, and tradition governed what it was that the king was capable and not capable of doing. Tarquin ignored tradition and custom and gathered more power onto himself and became more and more fearful that this power would be taken away from him by the strong and capable men of the aristocracy. And so he started arranging for exiles and executions of leading members of the Roman nobility. This increased over the course of his reign, according to the legends and stories that have come down to us. Not everything about Tarquin is necessarily negative, which is interesting. So, for example, it's Tarquin Superbus who is supposed to have completed the Temple of Juppiter Optimus Maximus, the center of religious observance by the state religion in Rome. All throughout the Roman Republic, he might perhaps have built a grander temple on the site of a previous, less distinguished Temple of Juppiter. But what we know is that the Temple of Juppiter Optimus Maximus, the construction of its final version, just short of dedication, is associated with Tarquin Superbus. He wasn't able to do the final dedication before the events we're about to talk about and his expulsion from Rome, and so, very symbolically, the Temple of Juppiter Optimus Maximus was dedicated by the first consuls who replaced the king. Another story about Tarquin is that he acquired the Sibylline Books. The story goes, and the story, like all the others, should be taken with a grain of salt. The story goes that a Cumaean prophetess, or Sibyl, approached Tarquin Superbus with a book of prophecies about the city of Rome and its future, and demanded a huge extortionate price for this book to be handed over, which essentially, supposedly, tells the future of Rome and all the things that the Romans need to do to ensure the satisfaction and appeasement of the gods to make all of that happen. But the price is so high, Tarquin Superbus refuses. And so what the priestess does is to take the book and rip it in half, burn half of it, and then offer the remainder to Tarquin at the same price. In some versions of the story, this happens twice, and so she rips it in half again and burns half, and then offers the remaining quarter of the book to Tarquin at the same price. And so now Tarquin is fascinated and convinced of the book's importance and pays the price. The Sibylline Books are revered and sacred and maintained and protected by a dedicated set of priests. And for the next several hundred years, whenever Rome faces a dire crisis that seems to threaten its very existence, the Sibylline Books are consulted, and the means of surpassing this crisis, the rituals that must be undertaken in order to ensure that the wrathful gods are made happy, are all contained within this book whenever the death of Rome is facing them. So by the end of his reign, Tarquin has become increasingly unpopular because of his reckless behavior, his abuse of power, the exiles and executions he's conducted. All of this comes to a head, according to the legend, with a notorious event. The son of the king, Sextus Tarquinius, is out carousing with his friends and decides to demonstrate the power of the monarchy and the preeminence of the king's son by choosing the most respected, most virtuous matron in all of Rome, the most admired of the Roman wives and mothers, a woman by the name of Lucretia, and to demonstrate his power by raping her. Lucretia is, of course, humiliated by this event, not simply because of the outrage committed on her, but most importantly because of the dishonor that has been visited upon her family, and how the presence of this corrupted version of her, this version of her that has been damaged, will be a liability to the other matrons of Rome, present and future. And so Lucretia tells her story to her husband and to the nobles who are most alarmed by the growing abuse of power by Tarquin the king, led by a man named Lucius Junius Brutus, whose own brother had been, according to the story, one of the nobles that had been executed by Tarquin. Once Lucretia has told her story, she then takes up a dagger and stabs herself in the heart in order to remove this damaged version of herself from the Roman Republic, from her family, and from the community of Roman matrons. The story is that Brutus immediately takes up the bloody knife and vows that Romans will never again be enslaved to tyranny. Brutus and his allies and the family of Lucretia then go to the Roman Forum and summon the citizens of Rome and appeal to them to turn from the king and his family. The assembly votes to depose the king and exile the royal family. Tarquin the king, as it turns out, is with the army at Ardea, which is 20 miles away south of Rome. Brutus goes there to depose him, but Tarquin had already left for Rome. And so Brutus gets there, and Tarquin's sons are there. They're thrown out of the camp, and the army greets him with jubilation. Tarquin, the king, meanwhile, returns to Rome, but is denied entry at the gates, and with the rest of his family goes into exile. That's not the end of the story, though, because Tarquin doesn't give up. He turns to allies that he has made, both amongst the Etruscans and amongst the Latins. First he goes to Etruria, and according to these stories, gains the alliance of an Etruscan king called Lars Porsena. And they jointly attack Rome and are, according to some versions of the story, successful. But Lars Porsena is either bought off or persuaded to withdraw and removes himself from the wars with Rome and Tarquin's campaign to recover his monarchy. And so Tarquin goes to the Latins and assembles a great alliance of Latin cities that have grievances against Rome. Rome has been growing more and more in dominance, and the Latins want to arrest this. And so they've been spoiling for a fight against Rome. This is their opportunity. Doing so in alliance with Tarquin is somewhat ironic, since Tarquin has been one of the authors of this growing Roman dominion over the Latins, but nevertheless, they're seizing their opportunity, perhaps plotting to get rid of Tarquin later. The Latins gather an alliance against Rome, and the situation is critical. Meanwhile, within Rome, the turmoil has been increasing, because the other part of Tarquin's plan has been to foment rebellion within Rome. There's a growing conspiracy within Rome to end the Republic and turn Rome over to Tarquin. This conspiracy is heartbreaking because there are members of this conspiracy at the very center of Rome, including Brutus's own sons. And Brutus has to oversee the judgment and beheading of his own sons in the Roman Forum for the crime of treason against the Roman state. And then calamity, Brutus is killed in single combat with another of the sons of Tarquin named Arruns. According to the legend, after Tarquin and his family were deposed and exiled, Brutus and his closest ally, a man named Poplicola, were elected as the first consuls of Rome. The actual historicity of this is very fiercely debated, and I'm not going to go into that here. Again, what's important here is the story that the Romans told themselves and why they were telling themselves this story. And Brutus demanded of the Roman citizens an oath that they never again suffer themselves to be ruled over by a king. When Brutus is killed in battle, the Romans become afraid that Poplicola will seize power for himself. Now that he is alone in power, they're afraid he will bring back the kingship in his own favor. And so Poplicola, according to this story, institutes a raft of populist reforms that are passed through the assembly that circumscribe the power of the consuls and ensure that the people have the right of appeal against the act of the state, and various other elements of what the Romans later consider to be the basic components of their freedoms as Roman citizens. And so Poplicola becomes a populist hero. All of this culminates in somewhere around 10 to 12 years after the expulsion of Tarquin. There is an all-out war with Tarquin and his Latin allies, which is called the Battle of Lake Regillus. And at the Battle of Lake Regillus, the Romans are utterly victorious. The threat of Tarquin and monarchy is ended forever, and Rome is now irrevocably a republic. We'll talk about the nature of the republic and how that evolves starting next week. For now, we need to unpack what this story is telling us. We know that Rome originally had kings. The kings were overthrown, replaced with the collective rule of the aristocracy, i.e. the republic. How the Romans explained that tells us a great deal about what the Republic meant to the Romans, and how they saw themselves as different from all of the other city-states around them that still held on to kings. There are a number of hints in the story that suggest that the resistance to the monarchy in general, and to Tarquin in particular, had been developing for some time. The stories about Tarquin's increasing abuse of power and paranoia seem to suggest a growing conflict and hostility on the part of the noble families of Rome toward Tarquin and toward the idea of a king. In other words, the things that Tarquin is doing are the things that only a king can do, and the kinds of things that the consuls of the Republic are not able to do, because the Republic and the consuls are a reform, an answer to the tyranny of kings. All of these gratuitous executions and the arbitrary and abusive alliances and unilateral actions on the part of the king are repudiated by the revolution. In some ways, Tarquin is an anomaly because he seems to be exceeding tradition and going beyond what kings normally did. But on the other hand, all of the kings are associated with innovations that they undertook on their own initiative and by their own authority. Going all the way back to Romulus, the stories about Romulus, the capture of the Sabine women is just one of the things that Romulus did to create the future of Rome. Numa creating the religious infrastructure of Rome out of the whole cloth on his own authority. Tullus Hostilius fomenting war for no reason and ignoring rituals. The reforms of Servius Tullius. All of the kings are associated with arbitrary unilateral actions. Before Tarquin, these are seen in retrospect as being beneficial to Rome. In other words, the 6 good kings, if we want to include Romulus as one of the good kings, the 6 good kings are responsible for laying the very foundations of the Roman state, Roman values, Roman culture, Roman society. They are venerated for these unilateral actions, but they're capable of doing this because the Roman monarchy allows for this exercise of fiat, this ability to act on their own initiative with or without the collaboration and approval of the Senate and the people. Tarquin, because of his character flaws and his own ambition and his own lust for power, takes that ability to act and turns it toward his own aggrandizement and against his own people. And it's because of this that the Romans awaken to the inherent problem of monarchy. On top of this, I've been placing a great deal of emphasis on the Roman family and how Roman society is made up of families and not individuals. And so you can almost see it sort of dawning on the Romans that in the context of this family, clan-oriented society, the idea of a single individual having special power over the whole Roman community is anomalous. And essentially, once Tarquin begins abusing his power and demonstrating the things that monarchy is capable of doing, the Romans come to the realization that monarchy is un-Roman, and that what is more intrinsically Roman is for the propertied families to share the rule together of the Roman commonwealth and ensure that no one family, no one individual has power or the ability to dominate the rest of the propertied families. In this context, it's interesting to take a look at the cognomen that Tarquin the king was saddled with, Superbus. Superbus comes from a Latin verb that means to overcome, literally to place oneself over something else. In the context of a military enemy, it means to conquer. When used in a social context as between Romans, to place oneself over other Romans is a demonstration of arrogance, is a demonstration of pride, is a demonstration of an un-Roman desire to be more important than everyone else. So this name, Tarquin the Proud, the English translation doesn't quite give us the full disgust that the Latin carries toward a man who seeks to place himself over other Romans. And so the Romans stage a revolution targeted toward eliminating a single magistracy, the one elected official whose office makes him capable of placing himself above the rest of the Roman nobility and people. What's by far most striking about this story, though, is that in retrospect, the pretext for this revolution and the moral justification for it is situated in the Rape of Lucretia. The violation of a Roman matron is placed at the very core and made the catalyst for that demands the rejection and expulsion not only of the Tarquin clan but of the very idea of monarchy. To me, there are some interesting parallels here with the story that's told about the Trojan War by the Greeks who survived the collapse of the Bronze Age and built an entirely new kind of society and culture in rejection of the Bronze Age values that had led to the arrogance of Agamemnon and the ultimate tragedy of the Trojan War. The epic poems of the rhapsodes during the ensuing Dark Age, which culminated in the Iliad and the Odyssey by Homer, the most pervasive and well-known of the reductions to writing of the epic tales of the Trojan War that were told in the previous centuries. These stories told of a war, the Trojan War, that must, in real life, in practical terms, have been incited by the fierce and aggressive trade rivalry that the Mycenaean Greeks had toward the Trojans, their only real rivals for the control of trade and commerce within the Aegean world. So this war is fully explicable in terms of practical political, economic conflict between two powerful industrial trade rivals. But the pretext and justification and moral imperative of the war is situated in an outrage associated with a Greek matron. Helen of Troy is abducted by Paris, and this sets the whole thing going. So there are some interesting parallels here, and also an interesting contrast, because for the Greeks, Helen of Troy is the embodiment of beauty, and therefore of the perfection of which the soul is capable, and the achievement of the ideal toward which all of the Greeks strive. The Greeks had this metaphorical association between physical beauty and what it is that men and women are capable of. Helen of Troy is the embodiment of beauty and of the physical ideal. Lucretia is the embodiment of Roman virtue and Roman values, the Roman cultural ideal. She is, like all good Romans should be, austere and humble and brave and aggressively, assertively loyal to her family and to Rome. And most importantly, in terms of the story, is widely recognized to be the most virtuous and most respected in all of Rome. Sextus Tarquin specifically targets Lucretia because she represents, because she is Roman virtue, because she represents and embodies the ideal of what Romans are and how they should behave. This story, therefore, frames Tarquin as deliberately attacking Roman values and Roman virtue. This is Sextus Tarquin using the power of the Roman male, which should be used against Rome's enemies. Blood that Roman men have on their hands should be the blood of those who stand against Rome. Instead of using his masculine ruthlessness against the enemies of Rome, he's turned that against the heart of Rome, a Roman matron who embodies the concepts of Roman virtue. Not only is he attacking Rome by attacking Lucretia, the responsibility of the matron is not merely to embody Roman values and Roman virtue, but to transmit it to the future. And so what Sextus Tarquin is doing is not merely attacking Rome as it is, but attacking Rome's future itself. All of this is symbolic, all of this is metaphorical, and, lest we forget, all of this is legend. All of this is a story that the Romans tell themselves about why monarchy was rejected, what monarchy is capable of, and why the Republic was instituted instead. Here's another question. What does it mean that the rape is perpetrated not by Tarquin, but by his son Sextus? What occurs to me is that Tarquin is represented as having several sons. Each of them has his own adventures. One of them takes control of a Latin town on behalf of Tarquin and sort of rules over it as a fiefdom. One of them ends up being the warrior that kills Brutus. Sextus has this sudden turn into a rapist monster. So the implication here is, in a way, of Tarquin the king sort of spawning this progeny, which is multiplying the danger that he poses to Rome from one generation to the next. So we go from one Tarquin to many Tarquins, and these Tarquins are more brutal, more uncivilized, more animalistic. than Tarquin himself. Tarquin is capable of presenting himself as a civilized man, although the mask increasingly starts to wear away. His sons don't bother with the pretense. They act as beasts, unleashing the raw power of the Roman male. Like the capture of the Sabine women at the start of the story of Kings, the story is about what men are capable of, and how crucial it is that that's balanced and complemented by the purity of the maiden and the virtue and Roman values of the matron. What the Romans do next and how they slowly develop this new system that ensures the shared governance of Rome, we'll start talking about next week. For now, that's that.